So I'm in the middle of porn addiction, drug addiction, which I'm bisexual, by the way. So it just evolved to that point, and then I started getting into bodybuilding, and then I became a bodybuilder, and then I built this huge bodybuilding team, and I looked at it and I was like, man, I don't know who that dude is. Then the mind says, oh, I don't need that anymore. Like, we only hide things from others that we feel that we're going to receive judgment about or we don't feel good about, and typically shame is what keeps it behind the curtain.
So you used to be a bodybuilder.
I did.
How has fitness played a role in your life? And how what's your relationship with that like?
Well, so I played, I was a 3-sport star growing up. So I did basketball, baseball, football. So, I was always athletic. I was always, moving my body, and sports was the outlet for that. And I ended up playing college baseball. And after a semester college baseball, I ended up quitting because I did not like the coach. Now, there's a lot of different symptoms, or that was a symptom of a lot of different causes that we'll get into. But once that occurred, I fell into a depression and, started, eating late night Taco Bell, and Little Caesars was across the street, and I started smoking weed and drinking. And I would say about a year after quitting baseball, I had gained like 30 to 40 pounds. So I remember just seeing, it was a party that we were throwing at our house, and somebody took a picture of me, and this is back when Facebook was like the only social media. And they take a picture of me, and I'm just sitting there with like my hat down, like kind of holding a football in my hand, like fat. and it got posted on Facebook. And I looked at it and I was like, man, I don't know who that dude is. So that was my wake-up call. And again, at the time, this is like 2008, 2009, Men's Health magazine was still popular. So went and grabbed a Men's Health magazine. It had a 6 weeks to get shredded circuit training with like some baseline nutrition advice. And I did it and completely changed like my routine. I did what's called a Maymester in college. So like you essentially take a whole credit in May, which was a 6 a.m. class, which means that I was waking up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I would go to the gym, do my work, and then I would eat good all day. And in about 6 to 8 weeks, I lost all 30 pounds because, I'm still young at the time.
Yeah.
And from there, I was hooked. So I got my degree my bachelor's degree is in history, which was doing nothing for me. Like, my idea at the time was I'm going to be a baseball coach and teach. So then I got a master's degree in education. But it was during my master's degree that I started learning about the American education system. And I was like, I don't want to teach because there's these standards that I have to teach to, and it's a test, and it's, what I know about it now is it's just grooming people to be, slaves to the system.
To be like industrial workers, basically. Yeah.
But, moving into that space, I was always somebody that felt called to teach. And now I get to teach what I love to teach. It's the subject I love, but it kind of blended together. And once I got out of college, I got a opportunity to do in-person training. So I was like teaching fitness at the time and everything that I had learned. And then I was also working as a restaurant manager for Longhorn Steakhouse. So, my degree didn't really net me anything, but ultimately fitness was always in the background. And it was something that I continued to hone in my own body and like learn my body and learn nutrition. And it was just something I was really passionate about. So it eventually became my career. Once I ended up quitting being a manager at Longhorn, I just kind of dove all in on being an entrepreneur and being a coach or a trainer at the time. And then being a trainer, like an in-person personal trainer, turned into being I would do nutrition plans. And then one of my clients asked me if I would help them with a bodybuilding show. And I'm like, well, I'm helping people lose 20 to 30 pounds. I'm sure I could do that. And so it just evolved to that point. And then I started getting into bodybuilding, and then I became a bodybuilder, and then I built this huge bodybuilding team. Like, it just, one kind of trail after the other, and it just kind of opened up to something that was much bigger. So fitness, even now, even though I've lost like 25 or 30 pounds of muscle, because I used to be like 230, 235, I'm about 205 now. And I still go to the gym, went to the gym this morning, still make sure that I'm taking care of my body. I see my body as not being something that is, in bodybuilding, it's something you show. And now it's something that I realize is my home. So I just optimize my health to how I feel. And a part of that is like my body still looks good because I'm just focusing on it feeling good.
Okay, so is there ever a part of you, because I've not to the same extremes, but I've like gone through phases where I'm like focusing on hypertrophy and just like growing muscles. Mm-hmm. And then other periods, like more recently, where I'm like either running or I'm just doing like different types of workouts, like more endurance or things that are not necessarily building like big show muscles. Mm-hmm. Then there are still times where I'm like, fuck, I wish I had like the big biceps or like whatever it is. Do you have that ever where you're like, man,
not anymore. And ultimately, like when bodybuilding happened, it was like all in on bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. I had done CrossFit for a little bit. I was really successful in CrossFit, but I ended up getting burnt out from the training style. And then I went into powerlifting because I was really strong from CrossFit and I just naturally could do that. And I was like, all right, this rest is too long. Mm-hmm. And once I found bodybuilding, I was like, I love the pump. That's what I'm addicted to. So it became the only outlet that I did. And it was just, my only goal was to get as big as I possibly could. And now, like I said, the difference being now is like, sure, that laid a good foundation for me. I would say there's parts of me that's like, if you had like 10 pounds more muscle, like that would be nice. Mm-hmm. But it's not enough to like stimulate me to like go and actually do it. So that's what I use my internal measure on at this point. It's like, if I really wanted to do it, like if it's really something that's aligned for me, then I would be doing it. But now kettlebells, yoga, I still do some weight training that is bodybuilding style, but I'm really into just the more mobility training and strength with mobility with kettlebells.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's also like the trade-off. It's like you could do the bodybuilding more, but like then you're not able to be as mobile.
Yeah, so to put this into a succinct way, I value how I feel over how I look, and because I value how I feel, I still look good. Yeah.
Versus if you just value how you look, you may not end up feeling good.
And so moving into that, I mean, I've been 5% body fat and not been confident. You know, the bodybuilding, what it does is it creates this massive body dysmorphia and then comparison. So I'm in the middle of porn addiction, drug addiction. You know, I was doing steroids, and there's a saying I like to say about bodybuilding is that if you're willing to stick something in your ass, you're willing to put anything in your mouth. Mm-hmm. So that put a whole pathway down into, you know, being really addicted to drugs in my late 20s, cocaine, MDMA mainly. And also I had started watching pornography when I was 14 years old, and just like that amplified because you're taking testosterone and like your sex drive is out of control. And I had really no mental discipline when it came to my mental and emotional health. But I had great mental discipline when it came to like going to the gym and pushing weight.
It's funny how that can be so compartmentalized. Like I was just talking about how when I used to drink, I would like be super disciplined and I would do all my runs. I would do all my workouts. I would go to jiu-jitsu every day. Mm-hmm. But then I would like binge drink every weekend.
Yeah.
And it's like just in these little, like in sections of my life, I was so disciplined. But then...
Yeah, and for me, obviously, it was a great mask. You know, I was building this outer shell of strength as a pendulum swing towards the fact that I was very insecure on the inside, right? So if we look at like the principle of rhythm and polarity and the way that these two principles work, the rhythm essentially says the swing to the left is the swing to the right. So if you feel, as I did, very unworthy and insecure inside, then my swing was, well, let me build my body to make me look good and I can be confident and I can get all these compliments and people can validate me. And then the polarity aspect of it is, well, without insecurity, you don't have security, right? So it's like these two intertwine. And now that I understand these two, which in mental emotional health is really what's helped me through that process. But during that time, I had no idea what was going on. And I rejected, right? And maybe this is something you identify with, is I would, if somebody would say, well, you're insecure or whatever else, like the first thing was a projection back out, right? Anger and blame towards them because I wasn't going to look at myself.
Yeah. So did you ever have people say that kind of thing to you, that you were insecure?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I showed up in ways. I mean, a part of being addicted to things is that there's these behaviors that you pick up, which is like lying and manipulating and controlling. And ultimately you're using these three primary behaviors to kind of like protect the addiction from being found, right? And porn, to me, has a especially insidious type of energy to it, because ultimately, like, it's done behind closed doors, right? It's also a jungle. I call it a jungle of different genres that you can find on there. And just like social media, when you click on something on an Instagram algorithm and then like 4 other things pop up that are kind of the same but a little bit different, porn does the same thing. So, when I was starting out and I was 14, I was watching, just baseline heterosexual porn because I was curious and horny. And then by the time I'm 30, like, the amount of genres that I went through, whether it was BDSM or even gay porn or orgy porn or like all these different things, it was just this trail of like perversions, like from what the original source of it was. So there's a lot of shame that comes with that. Like, I questioned my sexuality for a long time, didn't know who I was inside. I got a wife while I'm watching gay porn, and I'm like, am I gay? Which I'm bisexual, by the way. But that took actually getting out of pornography for me to understand that about myself. And with that, there's just so much sexual shame that comes with that behavior, and it's so easy to hide. Nothing against drinking, but like, if you're drinking, you got a beer in your hand. You know what I mean? If I'm doing porn, like, well, I can just do that in a dark room somewhere. That it made me very insecure around women. This is another effect of pornography. Like, because you start seeing people, for myself, people as being sexual objects rather than being a human being. And that disconnect in your mind creates a lot of perceptions that are not aligned with the truth of who that person is, but rather your projection of what that person is based off the mental imagery that you've been conditioned by. And then the other aspect of pornography, which is ultimately when we masturbate to pornography, we release oxytocin in our brain. And the release of oxytocin is the binding chemical. So ultimately you create a relationship with pornography, and the oxytocin has you keep going back for more inside of it. So it's just a very insidious addiction that created a lot of insecurities around my sexuality, around my confidence. And I would say that the baseline was like even love, right? Because ultimately what I'm seeking is just wanting to be loved, and I'm seeking love in something that can't give me love back. It's just all artificial.
Yeah, it really is. It's like connection that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. For me, that's what it feels like. So what you started at 14 and like probably started somewhat around that same age. And I think like it's like probably the worst thing that a developing boy can go through is access to pornography. But how did your relationship with it progress? And like, did you have times where you were like, this is a problem, or this is like, did you ever quit? Like, how did that go?
No, I never quit. I did when my ex-wife left me. It took, that much. It took even more than that, because there's so many stories inside of that of just pain and suffering. But the first time I remember it thinking it was a problem was when I was like 17, and we're at my friend's house and we're partying, we're drinking. There's a lot of variables to this, but ultimately, like, I had a girlfriend at the time, and she was very attractive, and she wants me to go into a room with her. I'm like, okay, cool. And I just done like 6 shots of like Golden Lager with like one of my friends, and I'm like, what the fuck, So I go into the room, and then we start fooling around, and I am thinking about porn images in my head while I'm with this girl, right? And like, I'm 17 at this point. So like, I had watched it enough that I had started to condition my mind to be sexually aroused by porn images rather than a person that was in front of me who was very beautiful. And again, like I said, I was drunk, whatever. I struggled to get an erection, and I'm 17. And after, I don't know, some time of nothing really working, we stopped fooling around, and then we go outside, and I remember sitting on a couch, and then I don't remember anything after that. I threw up on this floor and stuff like that, But I remember like leaving and being like, all right, well, you're 17 years old, and like, you just had an erectile dysfunction issue. Like, what is that? And again, could say all the different factors, but I didn't want to admit that it was porn, even though I knew I saw those imagery, or the imagery of what it was. But all that did was have me protect myself more and dive deeper into porn. So I'm like, well, I don't ever want to have that experience again. So like, porn. So by the time I'm in college, man, I'm jacking off like 2-3 times a day of pornography, locking the door, in the house that I shared with my friends, and telling them I'm studying all day. None of that shit. I'm literally just going into the depth of these things. And the only thing that can continue was really still experiencing what's now called, is diagnosed as porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So I started to experience it more and more. So now I'm taking like Viagra and Cialis in my early 20s. And by the time I was 25, and this is, again, skipping ahead, but just know that like I've had plenty of women in my bed, and I've probably had like a less than 50% success rate of actually like having sex because of this. I just got out of a relationship, and I was in one of those why me moments, why God, why me, what's wrong with me? Why am I cursed with this? Why am I not like other men? And as I'm crying out in this way, a voice speaks up inside of me and says, well, it's the porn. And it was the first time that I had been associated with this inner voice, like really like, whoa, that was energetically different than my mind, right? Than my brain, I guess you can say, my head area. And right when it said that, I still didn't want to accept that. So it was the first time that it really kind of popped up where it was a noticeable thing. And as I didn't accept that, I found my ex-wife and we got married. And the first year of us being together, I barely watched porn, and we had a pretty good sex life. And I was like, she healed me. And then after the first year, things start they calm down and everything else. And then porn starts creeping in. And this is where like me and her both did bodybuilding and then drugs. And like it just gets worse and worse, to the point where this is actually how my porn addiction came out. And I'd like to say that I was courageous enough to say that I said it, but I wasn't. So me and my ex-wife, we had a personal training business together. So we're both personal training. We have this team, bodybuilding team, and we're leaving the gym, and she grabs my hand and she says, we need to talk. And anybody that's in a relationship knows that those 4 words typically leads to some sort of conversation that's going to be serious, right? Well, for me, it stimulated a whole bunch of anxiety. Like I almost had an anxiety attack because I knew what she was doing. And
especially if there's something that you're like, oh fuck, I hope they don't, like, there's something off.
Yeah.
There's something you're out of integrity with.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time they say that, even if it wasn't about that, you're like, fuck, it might be that.
Well, and again, she had caught me grabbing lotion out of the bathroom, and like she had caught porn on my phone. Like she'd done all this stuff already. Well, more porn on my computer. She had done all this stuff already. So like I already had the breadcrumbs again of like, oh, I know what this is going to be. So we get into my truck and she has to see my phone. I'm like, all right, I like reluctantly give it to her. And then she goes to my in private browsing. And I say this story a lot, and people are like, bro, you can't like save in private browsing. Well, in 2017 on an Android, it did. Because what happened is she went to my in private browsing, she hits the Google search, and like 5 or 6 of the most common searches that I search for porn comes down. And that's what happens. It starts to save it, even if you do it so many times. And she says, what's this? And I look at her, I'm like, I don't know, it wasn't me. And she looks back at me and she says, well, this is your phone. Like, who else could this be? I said, I don't know. Somebody hacked my phone. It wasn't me. And it wasn't the first time I've used the hacked excuse. Like, that was multiple times, right? And after I denied it the second time, the voice popped up again. And it's like really loud. And it's like, tell her the truth. Tell her the truth. And she says, well, I'm going to ask you a third time. And if you lie to me this time, we're going to be over. That's it. And third time I denied it. I said it wasn't me. But right when I said it wasn't me, it was like the voice like took over. And I said it wasn't me, but I did watch that. And she gets out of the car, and obviously I'm beside myself because what she just said was, well, if I lie again that she's going to leave me, did I actually lie in that situation? I'm going through my own thing because I'm so delusioned at the time. And I start to drive home. And as I'm starting to drive home, it was the first time I really had like these ruminating suicidal thoughts. I'm like, all right, I'm going to drive my car off the road. I'm going to drive it into a pole. There's a Cabela's that's close. I can go grab a gun and just end it really quickly. Like I'm thinking about all these different ways, and then the voice pops up again. It has a question. The question is, who's listening? I'm like, what? It's like, well, if you're you, then who the one is listening to me? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I sit there for a second, and all my suicidal thoughts stop at this point, right? And now I have this curiosity, and I'm like, I call it divine curiosity now. I was like, no, this curiosity. I was like, who is listening? And I was like, if you're talking to me here, and I got this here, and like, then who's the one that listens, right? So about 4 weeks later, we're like working on it. I'm going to see an anxiety therapist and a sex therapist, and I didn't end up staying with either one of them. We could talk about that, why, but for the story, I'm working on things, and she comes home from work, and I can tell she doesn't want to talk. And at the time, you could classify our communication styles. Like, I was anxious attachment, and she's anxious avoidant, right? So like, perfect combination for not being able to communicate at all. So I can tell something's wrong, and I'm like, hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And she's like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. So essentially, I energetically push her to the point where she locks herself in the closet. And she's saying, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, just leave me alone. And I'm sitting on the other side of the closet door, just crying. And I'm like, I'm working on it. Like, please don't leave me. And like, we're just in this, this space at this point, and we're just both beside ourselves. And then all of a sudden, she swings open the door, and she yells out, I want to die. And she starts running, presumably for me, to the kitchen to grab a knife, because like there's no guns in the place. So I'm like, you're supposed to go into the kitchen. So I like see what's happening. I pop up, and I get into the door frame, and I get in front of her, and I'm like, please don't do this. Don't do this. And like, as I'm saying that, it was like I got a flash image of all the really profound choices that I had made in my life that like led up to that moment. Like, it was like I like replayed them super quick, and it was like, all right, now you're here. And I told her, I was like, don't do this. Like, I'll go, please, don't do this. And as I'm sitting there beside myself, realizing that the person that I'd pledged my life to, that I love the most, that, my actions have contributed to her not wanting to be on this planet, brought me into a space of just the absolute lowest. And I go and I sit down on the couch afterwards. I'm sitting on the couch, and suicidal thoughts start coming up again. It's like, you don't deserve love. You don't deserve to live. Like, she literally wants to kill herself, like all these different things. A voice pops up again. And it says, well, who's watching? I'm like, what? It's like, well, if you're the one that's living your life, who was the one that was watching the movie of your life? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know who that was. So those two questions, who's listening and who's watching, sparked this divine curiosity inside of me to really learn, like, what happened to me during addiction. Like, I learned about epigenetics and neuroplasticity and subconscious remapping, and the effects of porn on the brain, and all the things, like, the biochemicals and everything else, and like all the things. I learned all these things, and it helped me understand, but it didn't really heal anything. I was like, okay, well, I get it now. And like, I still feel like shit. But what it really did is it opened up my mind enough that while that was happening, this voice started to become more frequent and more prevalent. And then I started to like really tune into like the guidance that it was giving me. And then I started to learn how to trust what was being said. And that's been my journey from 31 till now I'm 38, which is just this, no matter what's happening, that what's being said in here is true. And everything else is a byproduct of either what is not in accordance with this voice or is accordance in this voice. And that's been a painful and beautiful journey into a deeper level of understanding of God and the Creator and myself and this reality and how I serve. But it all stemmed from the most amount of suffering that I wouldn't wish on anybody else. Because although the story is here and those two stories are there, 16 years I probably watched porn tens of thousands of times. I probably failed at pleasing my partners hundreds, if not thousands of times, and feeling like a failure as a man, feeling like just a piece of shit human being. And the only way I would know the amount of love and gratitude and faith that I have for myself now is through the healing journey of also knowing the absolute depths of what suffering is. Because without that suffering, I didn't know what compassion was until now. So it's been a wild journey so far.
Yeah, I know that voice can be very quiet at times. Like if you're not tuned into it, It is like the quiet little peeping up in the back, but it's right.
Yes.
From my experience, it seems to always be right.
It's correct for you. And that's the hardest part, is that what's correct for you sometimes results in the people that are in your life no longer being there because it's not correct for you. And it's actually what I'm going through right now. So me and my, well, not my fiance anymore, but we ended up breaking up. And it came from this internal knowing that although she's great and she's incredible and I love her and I wish her the absolute best in her life, that I can't be who I am becoming with her by my side. Our growth cycle has ended. And I'll tell you that, like, it's just been, 3 days ago I was crying, wailing on the couch. Now we've gotten through it and we're getting to a place that's a lot better, but I didn't want to give up the relationship. But I'm being called by the creator within me to be who it is that we are meant to be. And I have faith in that. So that's what I mean by this, like, the more you trust, the more you have faith, the more you do these things, it has to shift your reality to be in accordance to what you're being called to. And that typically results in loss and grief. And I've been very familiar with how to process and be with that.
Yeah, man, it seems like as humans, we're kind of wired to value short-term comforts and short-term gains, and that voice is almost like fighting for the other side. It's like, no, this is what's like really good for you.
Yeah.
Like, I know you want to be comfortable now, but sometimes you do have to go through like pain in the short term.
Yeah. Well, this is my belief. And any podcast I do, I always say, don't believe anything I say. Just like if it feels resonant to you, great. But my belief is that prior to incarnation on this planet, we sign agreements of like what it is that we're going to experience, because ultimately the things that we're going to experience during this time essentially expands our consciousness, or we could say it contributes to our spiritual growth as we're on our way back to experiencing ourselves as the creator at the end of all these incarnations. So with that, these agreements that we make, the soul knows. Like when I say the creator speaking within me, or God, or Holy Spirit, or the soul, all those can be the same in my opinion. So the soul knows like the path, and the mind forgets the path. So we get into this incarnation. It's like the mind forgets who we are, the soul knows. And the soul is like, look, like you already made the map before you got into this body. Like you already did it. You just don't remember that you made the map. I got the map. So the more you like surrender to me, you're going to get what you want. You're going to get what you really want. And all these short-term validations that are out there, these distractions, they are distracting you from you getting what you really want. And it takes a level of that trust, surrender, patience, and faith, really faith, to know that if you just follow everything that you've already called in before you even remembered it, is going to come. And that's been my experience over the past couple of years in spurts. And in this last year, I just chose to go all in. I'm like, all right, what do you want? What do you want me to do? You're in control now. And I'll just do whatever is needed.
Was quitting pornography or drugs or any of that, like how difficult was actual part of just getting off?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, quitting pornography was it was a longer journey than just cold turkey. And when I was helping guys with, and I still help occasionally with guys that are struggling with porn, when I was doing it, just full on. I would tell them, I was like, guys, like I'm not, the problem with the addiction community is that like you're expected to be perfect. And when you're not perfect, you relapsed. And when you relapsed, you're bad. And when you're bad, guess what you're going to do again? You're going to fucking relapse again. So like, so I say that because I would tell them, I'd be like, look, like I used to watch porn 2 or 3 times a day. I'm coaching you now, and I watch porn maybe once every 3 months. Like if you go to the gym once every 3 months, would you consider that a habit? No. So it's just giving that kind of perspective. But I say that because when I was going to the sex therapist and the anxiety therapist, the sex therapist was interesting because the first session we had, she was like, rate your level of honesty from 1 to 10. I'm like, what the fuck is she talking to me about honesty right now? I'm struggling with porn. And then I figured it out. And I was like, I don't know, like a 4. And then like we went through stuff. And then I was like, oh, it's a dishonest. It's an honest problem. And then she suggested that I go to, some meetings. The anxiety therapist was working through like, just the anxiety attacks and like, they kind of went together. But ultimately I stopped doing both of them. The sex therapist said, you need to go 90 days without nothing. So you can't have sex. You can't fool around. Don't watch porn, don't do nothing. And for me, the threat of my wife at the time leaving me was enough for me to be like, all right, fuck, I don't want to lose her. So like, I'll do this. And I went about 4 months, and it's an interesting thing. They tell you what's going to happen, and this is why they want you to go to support, but I'll talk about support in a second. It's like the first month, you're like, you kind of feel normal. And the second month you become like asexual. Like you don't get morning wood. Like you're not attracted to anything or anyone. Mm-hmm. Like it's just this weird, like, and you get afraid too, because you're like, am I always going to be this way? And then by month, like the end of middle of month 3, like day 60 to 75, things start to come back. And, after about 4 months, me and my wife at the time, we ended up having sex, and I didn't use like Viagra or Cialis or anything like that. Now, ultimately, she ended up leaving because even though I had stopped and I was really self-righteous about not watching porn anymore, there were other MAP behaviors like lying and manipulating and controlling that were still like running my program that I wasn't aware of. And that's why she actually left. But I ended up not going to the groups because there's 2 fundamental lies that are told inside of meetings. The first lie is, hi, my name's Zach and I am a porn addict. That's a lie. It's a lie because it's an identifying statement. And an identifying statement, what I know to be my I am, could never be addicted to anything. Who I am, this voice that I'm talking about, which is really my soul, is not an addict. The identification of such is what continues to perpetuate people into other addictions. I have an addictive personality. Cool. So you stop watching porn and now you're doing nicotine all the time. So cool. You stop watching nicotine because I have addictive personality. Cool. Keep identifying with that. And you're always going to be enslaved to this personality that you say you are, that you're not. And then the second thing is they say, and I am powerless against my addiction. And that isn't true at all. What got me to heal was the realization that I'm so powerful that I created so much suffering for my life. And if I'm that fucking powerful, then I'm also powerful enough to create love and joy and gratitude. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fucking figure it out because I can do this other thing. Now, I understand 12 steps because what they're essentially trying to do is move people into acceptance, but it's forceful. It's really the energy of admittance. And to get somebody to admit something is a forceful way of doing it. It is pushing into somebody. Acceptance is a receiving way. I accept. It's an open way of doing it. So when I started working with the guys in addiction, and I started working with, like, they'd been to 12 steps and doing these things, so I started working with these concepts. They progressed so much faster because it was coming from love and not shame and guilt of who I have to be. And then the relapse aspect of it, I was like, relapse don't exist. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like relapse has the same energy. It's an energy of you are enslaved to this thing, that you couldn't control it and you were enslaved to it. The truth is that you chose to do it again. And until you sit in the responsibility of the choice of doing it, the truth is you chose to have an experience that you once had again before. And if you sit in that responsibility at the beginning, you then can tune into the choice and say, okay, now I can see the triggers or the patterns that lead to this place, rather than doing it and be like, oh, I got pulled back in. You didn't get pulled back in. You chose to be there. So there's just energy behind the 12 steps that, again, has had a lot of success for a lot of people. Even the chip, man. Even the chip is like, then you never let go of the past. Like that chip's a constant reminder. It's been 1 year, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years. What about when it doesn't exist anymore? That's healing. When it just doesn't exist anymore, then you know you've transformed into something that's someone who's more of who you are. That's a representation or representing yourself as who you are.
Would you say those things don't exist for you anymore?
Yeah, like I'm not when was the last time I watched porn? Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Well, because ultimately, like, there was a time last year when I was like on like once every year, and then like it just stopped. This is when it really stopped. So this is getting more into the esoteric. I realized while I was in ayahuasca that I was in ayahuasca, and a porn image started to pop up in my mind, and then the figure turned into a demon. And I was like, oh, that's what's running the porn industry. I was like, it's a big black magic ritual. Because what I know about sexual energy now is that when sexual energy is channeled into our higher energy centers, or we could say if we pull it from without talking about energy centers, if you were to say, okay, when I feel sexually aroused, it's in my lower sacral, it's in my gut. Just keep using energy centers. If I can transmute that energy up into my heart and then up into my head, I get access to intuitive knowings, into information that could be, let's say, extra dimensional. I get access to gifts of healing, of energy healing. It's creative energy. So our society, or what we could say is the people running the show, quote unquote, right, have figured out that, hey, if we can suppress their sexual energy and put shame, and if we look at the society, if we put sexual shame and guilt on the society, it'll keep them from ascending to higher planes of consciousness, in which we can keep doing what we're doing without them rising up to freedom. And now we're seeing this collective consciousness of people starting to understand what to do with sexual energy. I'm not the only one talking about this. And that's really the primary reason that it exists, to keep us from ascending into oneness with our Creator.
So it looks like more freedom and more, just less shame, more openness around just the fact that,
yes, it is.
We have these, yeah.
Your sexual expression is your authentic expression. They're the same thing. Now, somebody could hear me say that and they might be like, great, I'm gonna go have sex with everybody. That's not what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is that the energy of your sexual expression, when transmuted into experience, and definitely transmuted into how you love to serve others, allows you to be a better servant. And like at a very core, we are all servants to the Creator, and we're all here. Not everybody's here to serve each other. Some people are, if we talk about the negative path, is more service to self. But it brings forward your purpose and your mission, and really allows you to freely express yourself. And it's the sexual shame, that's the authentic shame, that's also the guilt and the leftover grief and the anger and all these unresolved experiences that are preventing you from expressing yourself fully. And that's really what freedom is. It's a full expression without self-judgment, so that you can just be.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of truth in that, in like the repression of, because it is a repression of a part of who we are. Mm-hmm. And so do you think there is something about porn itself, or is it just the way that it's viewed as something to be hidden and done in private?
It's both. So you're going to always have both. It's never an or, it's always an and, right? So if we look at the intention behind the industry, and if we just looked at what it was and what it is, it was magazines. What it's evolved to is the technological age of video porn. Again, go on to
even like VR,
VR, and and now we have AI girlfriends, and they're creating robots that are going to be AI infused. Like this is all the transhumanism. We're getting into ultimately an insidious desire by a service to self organization. I use that instead of evil. If you like evil, that's fine. That is enslaving people into the body. That's enslaving people into thinking that there is no spirit, there is no God, there is only machine, and the only way I can progress in my experience is through this type of experience, bodily experiences.
So just curious, do you think there is a coordinated effort behind this, or do you think this is just the way that things kind of happen as people chase their bodily desires?
Well, 100 years ago there was no porn, right? So like the fact that this has started to show up means,
but it couldn't really exist, right? 100 years ago.
I mean, I guess it could exist in the sense of like if you wanted to go watch two people have sex, right? That could be porn, right? And there was no really like photos or anything that you could do, right? So like the existence of it was nigh, but the fact that we can have an experience, and the thing that people think about doing with that is to amplify it and to bring it into a more expanded way and to try and push it on people as much as you can.
Right.
That's a snake in a garden. That's like, just continually behind the scenes, like making it so that it seems like it's something that's easy. It seems like it could be innocent, because when I wanted to watch porn the first time, it came from an innocent curiosity.
Yeah.
The energy behind it is stay stuck here. Please be here. Please be here so that your genius, that your consciousness, your infinite intelligence that's inside of you doesn't come forward and find some solution so that we can't operate the way that we want to operate. So I haven't seen these evil beings. I haven't anything, but it stands to reason if we just use the principle of polarity, which is if there are people here that want to serve others and those people have a certain amount of power of serving others, and we use also the principle of rhythm, which means that the service to self has to be met with the same amount of intensity of service to others, then there has to be a organization that is against that is wanting to control and manipulate and enslave people. And we already see that inside of our governments. We see that in we see that in a lot of religions. Keeping a truth away from the people, which the truth that I know to be true is that we are already one with our Creator, and creating deities and heads for people to worship. So again, they still don't discover the truth inside of themselves. So it's all about control. Where one side wants control, one side wants freedom. And that polarity is playing out right now inside of our collective as we see it happening.
Yeah, I think there is certainly aspects of control on different scales. Like you could say the same thing for like a big tech company. Like Instagram is trying, Meta, Facebook, they're trying to basically get you to use their thing. Like what you're saying about porn, like stay here, you're okay here. That is like every company that is trying to win your attention is doing that exact same thing.
Yes, and to me, that's a service. The fact that attention is the most valued thing, that's a service to self activity. So that means, okay, cool. Let me figure out all the different ways that I can keep people's attention. And just this is separate but the same. I see these people are making all this money on YouTube because they're making these videos and they don't ever show their face. And what they're doing is they're just making like info fucking videos or like Hollywood videos or whatever else. I'm like, you guys are contributing because YouTube's paying you for the views. And I get it. And that's how you're making money. But you're literally just making nonsense for people to fucking numb out to. It's the same thing. Ultimately, freedom is found inside of ourselves. And it's not even something like true freedom is beyond words. You can't say it. It's just an expression. It's just an energy. It is. And again, I'm doing my best here. It is the most free, open, energetic feeling that you can have. That only happens from the internal to the external. And anything that comes from the external to the internal is constricting that from occurring.
Yeah, dude. There's so many distractions. And I've definitely recognized that recently. And because I've had moments where I'm like, everything I have is right here. I'm okay. I don't need any money. I don't need, I have plenty. But then there are times where I still get caught by things where I'm like, oh, I should chase that. I need that thing. I should go after that. How do you stay with that center and that
mission?
Yeah.
I would say ultimately this year has revealed really the greater mission on why I'm here. And prior to this, I was very much caught up in distraction. Going from being a bodybuilder and doing fitness coaching and doing really well in that, and then literally having my spiritual awakening and saying, although I value fitness, this is too egoic, especially bodybuilding. I want to be able to assist leaders and entrepreneurs with what I called emotional intelligence at the time. And I call it that at the time, but I don't call it that. It's already called that, you know what I mean? But I masked what I was teaching with emotional intelligence. And then as that occurred, more spiritual principles, like Hermetic principles, I talked about a couple of principles already. Hermetic principles started coming forward. And then I started to remember things. I started to remember little different magical rituals, like white magical rituals. I started to remember how to just, I call it, process people or just be intuitive with people. And I started to just get messages that I would tell to people that would be spot on. And where'd it come from? It came from source, man. I don't know. It's all these things started to occur. And it had me chase a lot of different things. Well, what am I? Am I a spiritual coach or am I an emotional intelligence? I'm a performance coach. I just got so lost in what I call myself. And it wasn't until this year that it was no, man, your mission is to assist others with healing and ascending into heart-based consciousness. That's why you're here. Whatever that looks like to you is what that looked like to you, but start talking about it in that way. And I'm like, okay, cool. And heart-based consciousness is what we consider, heaven or the kingdom or fourth density consciousness. If we wanted to use some material from a raw material, which is one of the books that I follow, it is a state of consciousness of unconditional love. and compassion and forgiveness and grace and honesty and a perfect integration of the masculine and the feminine. The pathway to the heart is by healing from everything that isn't the heart. So if we want to move into this space, we have to start looking at what's in the way of love. Well, the things that I feel guilty about, the things that I feel shameful about, the ways that I call myself unworthy, the ways that I've interpreted past experiences to mean something that isn't true. And until we actually look at those things and learn how to release them from the body, which releasing the energy from the body and coming to a space of resolve in your mind are two different things. Once we can release the energy from the body, then we feel the inner freedom. So the premise of what we could say shadow work is that you're already love. Like you were born love, I was born love. And then as we have our experiences, we start picking up different experiences that we interpret as being shameful, guilty, anger, grief, all these different things. But because we're not taught at a young age what I believe emotional intelligence is, which is knowing how to intelligently express an emotion without hurting somebody else, since we're not shown how to release the energy out of our bodies, out of our energy bodies, we hold on to them. And then we get to a point where we're like, well, how could I could tell somebody, hey, you're love, and be like, I'm not love. What the fuck are you talking about? Because you've picked up so much in your life that tells you otherwise. So the pathway back to love is, again, okay, I need to start looking at all the ways that I'm unloving with myself and others, and learn how to transmute and transform these experiences from shame into love, from guilt into gratitude, from these higher emotions that are available to us in our own perceptions, and with a wider view of this reality that we find ourselves in, you know?
Yeah. I mean, just like dropping into your heart too, that's always nice to, or just go into your body. That's like my literal interpretation of heart-based consciousness. What is that journey like for most people? Is like, because it can be, I mean, there's a lot of things. It can be scary, it can be intense, and it can also just be like difficult to even see. Like if you're like, oh, like you're holding on to all these things, it's like, no, I'm not. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. How do you even identify that? How do you start with that?
Yeah, so I'll give you 4 ways, and those that are listening, here's a simple exercise. So I call these the 4 walls of dishonesty, and I actually developed these when I was addicted to porn, but then I started to realize that we're addicted to not being ourselves, and these are the things that we do. So the first wall is hiding. Right? So hiding is a symptom of shame. Like we only hide things from others that we feel that we're going to receive judgment about or we don't feel good about. And typically shame is what keeps it behind the curtain. And then we have denying. Now, what you're talking about just a second ago is denial, when our conscious mind denies the experiences of the body. So whenever you are, let's say like driving is a good time where like your subconscious becomes open. Like let's say you're driving and there's a couple of like memories that pop up for you. And these memories have a certain emotional charge to them. Maybe it's a loss of a loved one or a breakup, or maybe you fucked up and like you just never got forgiveness or even admitted that you were wrong. And it just like pops up and it keeps running. That's literally the energy in your energy body, and you could say your physical body, is informing your conscious mind of unresolved experiences. And what the body wants to do, because your body's like, man, this vehicle is a vehicle of love. I'm not meant to hold on to these things. I'm letting you know that this is still here so we can get rid of it and we can move on. But the conscious mind says, no, I don't want to, I'm not unworthy. I'm not a bad person. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that. And literally pushes the energy back into the body and then keeps it stored there. And then people will start having these repetitive thoughts, right? And it's like, okay, it's literally signaling you, man. Like it's trying to release it. Just look at it. So that's the one way that our mind really does. Is it's interesting because the thing about denial is that denial empowers it to exist. Because if there was nothing to deny, there would be nothing. So the denial actually prolongs it to occur. Then the third one is just lying, straight up lying. But how we lie in a sense of honesty, the way I define honesty is being one with what is. And if you look at the word honest, there's the word one is in between it. And what that really means is that when we're honest, we speak with specific language, and we also are... We're not seeing it in perceptions or illusions. We're seeing the truth of the experience. Like, this is what actually happened. So if you use that as a lens and say, okay, well, anything other than that is lying. Well, shit, if you come home from work and, maybe your wife is like, hey, you seem like you're down. You're all right? And you're like, yeah, I'm fine. It's a fucking lie. Right there, that's a lie. And in that moment, not only are you lying, but you're also robbing your partner of the ability to be there for you. And most women, in a sense of this case, that's what they want to nurture. Like, oh, you've had a bad day, let me nurture you. Oh, okay, no, you're actually taking that away, right? So you can start to look at lying in that way. And then the last one is trying. And people look at trying as like, well, how is trying dishonest? Well, ultimately, you're trying to be something that you're not. And if anything that you try to be that you're not being, like there's a gap between your conditioned self and your authentic self. And mainly it's your conditioning. It's this ego or conditioned self. And also it's a really good cop out for your mind. Because let's say like you want to achieve something great and whatever that is that you want to achieve. And somebody's like, hey, how's it going? You're like, oh, I'm trying. Like in that moment, you feel pretty good. But the truth of the matter is that you're not most likely doing everything that you need to do. People that are actually doing it, even if they haven't achieved the results, they don't use the word try because they know I'm waking up every single day. I'm taking care of my body. I'm making content. If you're a content creator, I'm managing my team. I'm having my meetings. Like I'm on it. And because I'm on it, I don't use the word try because I know that all I have to do is be committed to this plan and be consistent with it. And eventually that result will come. So a simple equation for results is that consistency plus effort over time equals results. If I'm consistent with effort over time, the result will occur. And if you just apply that to, it could be fitness, it could be anything in your life, like that's what happens. But most people question the plan, they question themselves, they question all these different things that prevents them from being simply consistent.
Yeah, that's funny that you say, like, because when you said trying, it's like, it feels to me like you are part of the way in, you're doing some of it and you're kind of just hoping that something else will fill in and it'll just happen.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, and again, to go through the addiction, I hid my addiction. I denied that I had a problem. I lied about it constantly, and I tried to heal. Over and over and over and over again. And all that did was just, again, create this illusionary wall that I was doing something about it. I wasn't doing anything about it. I would say that I would try, and then next day I was in the room watching porn again. It's not fucking real. Just making you feel better for a second.
Like I see. So it was like, do you just not have a desire anymore to watch porn? Is that what it is? Or is it that you have a stronger desire? Like where did that go?
Yeah. So, we'll go through the healing process. One, my fiance that I was with was really instrumental. And I also experienced a lot of, maybe we can call it initiatory experiences or magical experiences. But the first experience that I had was I was in the middle of actually doing some channeling. So to give context to channeling is where you channel in information from what you consider like a higher dimension. And while that was happening, I was being greeted like my sacral was going off, and I was also seeing imagery of porn. And I realized that I was being greeted by a negative entity of a higher dimension, and I was channeling through positive information. Again, polarity was happening simultaneously. And for context, outside energies, we could call them entities or energies, are only going to expand what is unhealed inside of you. So if you're watching porn and you have a lot of fear and shame inside of you, guess what you're vibrating at? Guess what you're resonating at? You're going to then attract energy around you, whether that comes in the form of experiences. So this is principle of vibration and principle of correspondence. Whether it comes in experiences or whether you actually attract an energy, a negative energy that's going to amplify how you feel. So when that happened, I realized I was like, oh, I still have some unhealed shame about this. And after I was done with the experience of writing, I went and I drew a bath. And as I was drawing a bath, it was a perfect place to do it because it was an Airbnb at the time. Had some Epsom salt and I lit a candle, and I draw this bath. And I put Epsom salt in, and before I stand into the bath, I bring my hands to prayer center, and I have a 4-step intention. I'll state it here, but this is a magical intention that works really well. And I said, it's my intention to forgive myself for choosing to shame my sexual expression. I willfully accept all things needed for my intention to become manifest. All things are possible through you, Creator. And so it is. So I use these at my retreats too, and this is the whole center point of the retreats that we do is around forgiveness. But so then I get into the bath. When I get into the bath, a best way I can describe it, channel of energy comes over me, and like my mouth opens up, and then I come down, and then I just start bawling, crying. And as I'm crying, I'm seeing like all these mental images in my head of watching porn and like but it was sexual shame. So it was like times where like I had porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and like I saw like my ex-wife like crying and disappointed, and like it was like happening so quickly, and I'm just like, purge crying as this is happening. And that happened for, I don't know how much time because it's hard, but let's just, for the sake of the conversation, let's say it happened for 15 minutes. And then it cleared. And after it cleared, I swung to this other side where I started just laughing hysterically at how ridiculous sexual shame is. I was like, that is ridiculous. It's ridiculous that we do this to ourselves. How we do this is so crazy. So it's like I had this new level of like awareness. And then after I was just laughing hysterically for about the same amount of time, I swung back to the middle, and then like my body like became what felt like it was like endlessly full and endlessly empty. And it was just warm. It was just love. And then the voice inside of me is like cheering me on. It's like literally like a cheerleader inside of me. It's like, oh, you did it, all these things. And the reason why I say this is that after that occurred, the desire to watch porn was less, because it was the shame and the guilt and the bad and the leftover behaviors, or not leftover, but the unresolved experiences that were keeping that desire constricted, and also amplifying the desire to continue to do that thing. But once the energy left my energy field at cause, so if we look at principle of cause and effect, the energy or the emotions that were stored is a cause. The effect is the behaviors and thoughts. Since I removed the cause, the effect fell away. So the desire lessened. And I had more experiences like this over time. Like I could tell you about 7 or 8 more of experiences of like these initiations that kept happening. And as it was happening, the desire was less and less, to the point where, yes, my subconscious mind still has like I don't see porn images like I used to, but like there'll still be like hey, you're alone. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm alone. That's cool, man. But there's no energy. There's no emotion to that thought. So it just passes. And that's really what creates the freedom is that when there's no longer an emotional intensity to a thought of a past experience, then the mind says, oh, I don't need that anymore. And once it realizes it doesn't need it anymore, then it just stops altogether. And secondly, because I had those experiences, I was able to actually have sex with my fiance in the way that sex was meant to be done. And I never had sex that way. I never had sex with what you would consider as actually making love. And when I was done, I was like vibrating. Like I was just like laying on the bed and like sprawled out. And I was like, oh my God, it was ecstasy. And it was the experience that I'd always craved to find in porn that I never could. So once I had the healing experience and then I had a new experience of sex, I was like, I want more of this. I want more of this type of connection, which also diminished the desire, right, to actually watch porn.
Yeah, there's so many things like that where we try to fix the effects, like we try to fix the behavior when there's something behind it that is just going to keep coming out if we don't address that.
Yeah, it just morphs, right? Like, we talk about addiction, whether, it's porn or nicotine or alcohol or weed or whatever else, it's just morphing into different things. And then there's sneakier ways, like, I work with some people and sometimes they're like, I keep attracting these partners that like are fucking abusive. And I'm like, cool. I was like, well, what do you do to yourself? Like inside that moment. And they're like, well, I was like, why do you get with the next partner? Because I always think they're going to be different. I'm like, yeah, they got different skin suits, but it's the same person underneath. And that's coming from an energetic space, and that's coming from an energetic space inside of you. You're attracting these people. So how do you feel about yourself that you've done this to yourself? And this is the tricky part about it, is that ultimately we live in like the personal development field, and it's starting to get a little bit better with the EQ aspect of it. But let me just write more journal. Let me just journal more. Let me just do some affirmations. Let me just stop being a bitch. Like, let me just and I get to the motivational world. I'm like, some of the things these motivational speakers say, I'm like, dude, you're just fucking killing people, because you're essentially saying like, you can do it. And you might be saying it in some direct way, like, get your act together, whatever else, but you're not realizing that the people that are hearing your message might have some unresolved trauma that is the reason why they can't. And then they look at other people and they say, well, they can do it and I can't. What's wrong with me? And then it just makes it worse. So real healing is, I need to start to look at the energy, the energetic plane, or emotion, energy, emotion, And I start to look at these things and start realizing that expression is the key to freedom. So expressing the energy out of the body. And one of the biggest things that the mind does is it has this one experience. And it's like, it's over, I'm done. And it's like, it's never over, I hate to tell you. Like, you're healing, you're going to, as long as you understand how healing actually exists, you're going to be healing until the day that you die. And then when you have another life, if, again, I believe that we're going to have another life, you're still healing. And these beings that are in the higher dimensions, they're still healing, because guess what? They're not one with God just yet. They're not back in the journey just yet. So we're on a healing journey until we find ourselves one with the Creator again, no matter how many lifetimes, no matter how many dimensions. And when you keep that perspective, you stay open and willing, you move through change at such a rapid rate that you also find your mission, you also find your willpower, you also find your strength inside of yourself of what really matters to you.
Yeah. I mean, so many people are caught up in the day-to-day, just like getting through things, doing what they think they have to do. And I should just say I here, doing what I think I have to do. Yeah, it's powerful when you, like, there are times where I can step out of that, probably a few times a week, where I just have that that realization of like, okay, all this shit I think is important, that's like, let that be for now. And then have like a view from the outside of like, what's really important to me? What should I really be doing? Yeah. And yeah, like you said about healing, it's going to keep happening. Would you say I feel like I know the answer. Your quality of life is going to increase as you heal.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what motivates me is the experiences that I've had and how I feel about myself now and the connection that I have with God inside of myself. I want other people to feel that because, again, I've also suffered. So the fact that I know my suffering means that I detect suffering in other people, and I'm like, man, like, there's so much more, but you have to get out of this. There's just these baseline beliefs that have been conditioned by, especially by our Western world. One of them is that it's never enough. Like, you have to do more, you have to do more, you have to do more, you have to accumulate more, right? It's one of those things. The other thing is that on the other side of that is that if you don't do enough, then you're going to fail and you're going to be on the streets. You can't pay your bills and you can't pay your things and everything else. And like, and this scarcity, not enoughness, creates this collective consciousness, especially in our world, in our country, that prevents us from being grateful, that prevents you from being patient, that prevents some people from simply meditating for 10 minutes a day so they connect with inside of themselves, that has some people judge meditation as being the devil. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all these different ways that we just have been collectively conditioned to be this way. And what I really know now is that the slower my life has become, the faster my impact has expanded. So the more my mind is slowed down, the more I give myself time, the less that I work. And it's not that I still work, but the discernment inside of myself of what to do and what not to do has saved me so much time, rather than just from scarcity, because this is the energy of scarcity like this. So you feel like, wow, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do this, and like, you create these layers of this instead of like the rocket ship of just doing the one thing, right? And I was in that, like, so I understand that fully. But now that I understand what it is, it's like, okay, cool, I'm only going to do these things, and I'm going to repeat do these things, and this I know is going to get me to where I want to get to. And that nets less work, less energy used, and it also nets a faster way to whatever you might consider success to be.
Yeah, that like busyness, just constantly trying to do. It's like everything that comes into my mind, like when I'm in this state of busyness, everything that comes into my mind, I'm immediately like, I need to do that. That's super important. I need to do that. And not, discernment, like you said, of like, do I really need to? A lot of the times the answer is no. I don't need to.
Yeah, and again, I identify with that so much because that level of busyness, and I'll just use the word robbed a lot of experiences that I could have had over what I would say would be the last 7 years. So many times I chose to sacrifice fun for work that wasn't actually filling me up. It was leading me somewhere. I'm grateful for it because it led me to this place. So like I had to live all that for me to be like, okay, this is what this is, right? But I also lost parts of myself through that process. Let's say lost. I conditioned myself to believe that my worth was centered around my work, that it was centered around my work ethic, that it was centered around my problem-solving capabilities, that it was centered around how much money I would make, and how much influence and impact I could create from that space. And the truth is that I never was satisfied with any of it. So since I was never satisfied with any of it, I could say that, man, I've coached 5,000 people and I've helped that many people either with fitness or entrepreneurs and everything else. I couldn't say that with any gratitude because it wasn't enough. It wasn't a million. It wasn't a billion. It wasn't some fucking number that actually doesn't exist, because even if I got to 1 million, it still wouldn't be enough. So it wasn't until I was able to slow down and be like, man, like all of this shit that you're doing, you're just avoiding something. And the real thing that I found out that I was avoiding was I was avoiding the fear of failure, the fear of unworthiness, the fear that not enoughness, the scarcity aspect of it. And once I really sat in that and learned how to release that, and also learned how to discipline my mind to use these principles that I've been talking about to instantly shift into the state that I want to be in, to be that way, things became much easier. And just to give you guys anybody that's listening, last year at this time, my business was doing about $30,000 a month, and I was working the hardest I ever worked. This year, last month, we made $79,000 and I'm doing less work. So almost tripled, close to tripled the revenue that came in, doing less. And it's just because I figured out the one thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep doing that thing. And that comes with doing the work and healing, and again, really activating what that mission is inside of you.
Yeah, and that's like you said earlier about the internal to the external. It's like when you figure that out, then the external world reacts and kind of fits that, like with your monetary example.
Yeah, and so there's
the one, sorry to cut you off. The one thing I always, it's a tricky one, because people will say these things that are, like do what you love and then the money will just come. And when you're outside hearing that, you just hear the money will come. Yeah. And you miss the point. Yeah. So how would you tell people, because I'm sure you would rather be where you are now, even if your business was doing worse than it was.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So the true change wasn't that your business makes more money, it's that you changed. Exactly. And you are in a different place now.
Exactly. So one, if this is why I'm so passionate about healing. So if I look at the healing aspect, my body wasn't holding shame, and not that I want to say this on record, not that I can't experience shame, guilt, or anything like that. It's that I don't hold on to it. So I know how to express it, but because that's out of my energy field, I'm not vibrating at these energies anymore. So I'm not attracting the same type of repetitive experiences that's coming from shame, guilt, X, Y, and Z. So that healing allowed me to just be more in a space of love. And then from that space of love, I got really clear on what it is I'm calling in. So now from a do what you love and money will come, now I'm resonating at a frequency that is an attractive frequency. It's not the other is attractive frequency, but it's attracting the thing I want rather than repelling the thing that I want. And then through that aspect of it, realizing that from this state, there's also the thing that most people that are in a very scarce mindset have a hard time believing, which is miracles, which is faith, which is if I just keep going, I'm going to either meet the right person, or I'm going to be in the right place, or I'm going to be in whatever place that I need to be that's going to expand my mission. And it's not a reliance on that, because that's not what faith is. Faith is just knowing that if I just listen to what this voice is telling me to do, and I just follow it and I do it, it's guiding me to exactly what it is I want to create. And that's the miracle aspect of it, that when people are really stuck in the scarcity and everything else, they're like, that's the risk they're unwilling to take. So when you look at faith, I love using the Tarot cards and the Fool card. So if you ever want to look at a Fool card, the Fool card, essentially it's this very jovial, eloquent person, and they're about to walk off a cliff. And that's the scene of it, right? And when you look at it, people will say, well, of course, you're about to have to walk off a cliff. That's really foolish. But it's a symbol of faith, because ultimately faith is walking off a cliff and knowing that God's got me, even though I'm about to walk off this cliff. And if anybody's ever seen Indiana Jones, and I think it's the Temple of Doom, where like he has to cross this thing and like he can't see a bridge, and then like he kicks some dust and then there's a bridge there, and it's like he steps out, and then like that's what faith is. So that's the miraculous aspect of like true trust and faith in your path, in the Creator, in your soul and what it's guiding you to. And you are rewarded. Your faith is rewarded. And that's how your faith is rewarded, in miraculously unexpected experiences that amplify you faster than anything you could ever do. And this is talking to me, sitting behind a computer for 9 to 10 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, grinding at something that actually isn't aligned with what you're meant to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people need to hear that. I need to hear that. What's a piece of advice that only you could give?
Piece of advice? I've never been asked that question before. Well, I'll just use this. Faith and gratitude are the most magnetic forces that you can cultivate inside of yourself for no reason. And that's a source of what I would consider to be like spiritual or emotional mastery, when you can sit there and not have anything to be grateful for, but still just tune your body to experience gratitude. And when you get to that point, you realize that you're an energetic being, and not only you're an energetic being, but you are the cause of your reality. You are the co-creator, and you are the cause of the creations that occur. And if I want to be able to create what it is that I want, then ultimately I need to be grateful for what I have. So being able to tune your body to both faith, which to me, faith is almost like, for me, how I experience it, it's a heart out of the mind, out of the crown, and then kind of into reality. And then gratitude brings it into the heart. And I'm about to create a meditation for this, because it starts to create this like circular energy that literally starts, like I can hear like whoa, 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 as it's happening. So being able to integrate both of those and embody both of those into your life without the need of any outside external thing to be grateful for or to have faith about will amplify your life energetically into a space that, again, you're getting into the space of miracles at that point. So if anybody wants, like, if you're listening, you're like, well, how? That question alone keeps you from being able to do it. It's about being so present inside of your body and learning what the emotion feels like. And again, just as your mind has its own level of intelligence, so does your body. And it's a skill that if you can learn it, like I said, it'll radically transform your life very quickly. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be all butterflies and rainbows, because you might have to remove some things out of your life to be able to cultivate that level of faith and gratitude.
What does your dream life look like?
Oh, my dream life. So I've thought about this a lot. Travel is definitely one of them. I would like to have a private jet. Not for the allure of a private jet. I just consider that physical freedom. So I would love to be able to hop on a jet and just like go anywhere I want to in the world, whatever that is. I would like to have a couple of properties, which is going to be coming up this year, which I'm really excited about. So I'd like to have a couple of properties in different areas that I can obviously fly to and visit. Taking away the quantity or quality aspect of service, if every day I could be able to assist someone else in shifting their perception from being misaligned with fear or hate or whatever else, and allow them an opportunity to see love in their life. And I did that every day, which I'm not around people every day, but again, dream life, I had the opportunity to do that every day. That would be enough for me. That's me living my purpose in that moment. So this is an opportunity for me to do this right now. I want a partner. Obviously, like my fiance is no longer mine. And that's only given me an opportunity to be more clear about, even though I'm bisexual, I do prefer a woman to be a partner. So that's helped me be even more clear about what type of partner that would be. But of course, I crave partnership in that way. And really expression. Like, if every day I can just be who I am and not hold anything back inside of myself and preach what I know to be true and be able to have that be a positive impact with somebody else, not even with preaching, but just being present and being in my own presence, that would be the dream life.
Beautiful, man. I appreciate you coming on. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so Instagram is and TikTok are currently the platforms that I do for Social media, it's my name, at Zack Blakeney. And I'm not going to link something in the show notes, or just spell my name right.
I'll put all that stuff out there.
And then website. So I have a one-on-one transformation program. It's www.thepathinward.com/liberated program. And then I also have a 3-day retreat. It's a transformational retreat that we use psilocybin and experiential processes. It's called Liberated, and that's www.thepathinward.com/liberated retreat. You can find out any information there, all testimonials, all the things. And also, if you listen to this podcast and you just simply have a question, you're welcome to just DM me your question. I don't hold anything back. I'll answer whatever it is that you would like to talk about.
Yeah, we'll make sure all the websites and stuff are in the show notes. All right, brother. Appreciate you. Bye, everybody.